And we're live. There we are. That went quick. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Cryptocito. I have a very big interview, probably one of the biggest or the biggest interview today. Patrick Bush is here, senior analyst at FANAC. Personally, I've heard of FANAC the first time when you had this proposal for a Bitcoin ETF. I think that was a couple of years ago. And I was extremely surprised to see when you guys published a report about Atom, why we're bullish on Atom. So we're going to dissect this report a little bit today and also just generally hear your thoughts on Cosmos as an ecosystem, but then also the Cosmos Hub specifically, and how you guys see the product market fit for Atom in that whole internet of blockchains and also the broader cryptoverse. But yeah, and Patrick is the man who wrote most of the report. But yeah, I'll let you introduce yourself. Maybe you can share some words on yourself and also a bit of a background on what FANAC is and what you guys are doing in crypto.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm really excited to be Cryptocito. I used to watch him all the time and listen to him all the time. So it's a big honor to be here, and it's cool to be able to talk about our thesis with all the cosmonauts. I want to say before we start that, first off, this is not financial advice. I'm not licensed to give financial advice. No one should probably listen to my financial advice. And FANAC does have a position in Atom. I myself have a position in Atom. Nothing I say is promissory, meaning nothing I say will happen. So now that we have it over, we'll talk a bit about myself, my second favorite topic, and then FANAC. So FANAC is a TradFi manager, 90 billion in assets, very much towards commodities, stocks, traditional mutual funds, ETF type business. The CEO, Jan FANAC, is very interested in the space. He invested early on in a number of very important publicly known crypto projects. I can't say precisely which, but he's done exceedingly well in those. And in general, he's excited about the space, and that trickles down throughout the firm. So he's made a directive for us to get into the space and to figure out the things that will potentially have value over the long run. We've filed for the Bitcoin ETF several times, and as you know, they don't let us have that, but maybe in the future they will. No one knows. But yeah, so FANAC is extremely bullish in the space. The CEO, Jan FANAC, who owns the firm, he's the sole proprietor, it's a family office, is heavily involved in the stuff. And so that's where we are as a firm. About me, my job here is to look at different crypto projects, particularly layer ones, try to understand them, see if they're investable, and just kind of ascertain whether or not it's a good long-term bet. So that's my role here. And then talk about the people, try to explain these really complicated, abstract concepts to people and try to simplify them.
What is your general crypto thesis from FANAC's view? Like, how do you view the space? You said you guys are pretty big on crypto as an industry. Maybe you can share a little bit about the outlook, how you view how crypto is going to evolve this decade, maybe towards the end of 2029, 2030. Because also in the report on Atom, you take 2030 as kind of like a benchmark. Like, that's how you see how IBC adoption will grow, interchain security will play out. So what is your general crypto thesis before we get into Cosmos specifically?
Yeah, from the firm standpoint, the inference to think about is that this firm was built basically on the back of the gold ETFs and gold products in the late 70s. And so when Bitcoin came out and it became apparent to Jan its potential to replace gold, it was not only like a bet on the future, but a way to make sure we weren't disrupted ourselves. So looking at that, that's like one way to understand it, just the power of having a sovereign, immutable currency. And then from the standpoint of like smart contract platforms, like the way in which we think about it is we've broken down future use cases in 2030 into kind of three main sectors. There's finance, banking, and payments. There's the metaverse, and there's like infrastructure. And the idea is by 2030, because of the massive gains in efficiency, reduction in overhead, that those spaces will migrate a large portion of their total addressable market to crypto rails, not necessarily meaning that crypto will directly benefit exceedingly from that, but at the very least, like that's where they'll settle things, that's where they'll host their applications, that's where that stuff will be. And so that's kind of how we're looking at it, right? We're looking and saying, what are the total addressable markets, the TAM of each of these end markets in 2030? And then we say, okay, what portion of that is going to be on public blockchain? And then from there, we dissect it and say, okay, based upon our outlooks, what percentages will be on Cosmos, for example, or in Cosmos app chains, or Ethereum, or Polkadot, or Aptos, or Sui, or Cardano. Just kidding. But yeah, so that's kind of the basis of what we're looking at. And the biggest thesis is that just, again, the sovereign money, right? Like from a international standpoint, just this new currency that could potentially compete, that's interesting, that has a lot of properties that mirror gold. And then second, the smart contract application potential from the standpoint that it's going to make things substantially cheaper to do and more accessible for lots of people. I don't know, do you want to get that a little more?
No, I think it's just interesting to hear that you guys are interested in a broad array of crypto and not just say, like a lot of companies or individuals, sometimes they just look into one thing and then they run with it, or they even become tribal about it or toxic about it, right? You have this in the Bitcoin community. I think they're now slowly, also destructing themselves. But like, what is your views in general on Bitcoin? Because it sounds like you guys see a lot of innovation in alternative or emerging new projects, new layer ones, layer zeros. So what is your general views on Bitcoin? Like, how do you think by the end of this decade that Bitcoin will still be the largest coin in terms of market cap?
So I think everyone started this stage as a Bitcoin Nazi, right? Like you kind of thought about it, you heard about it, it sounded really cool. Our thoughts are that, like, okay, let's go back first. Like, let's talk about the Bitcoin community and all these different communities. Like maximalism obviously is a suboptimal way to look at things to an extent, right? Like humanity, it evolved to be tribalist. That's who we are. That's like in our nature. And as part of that, it gave us survival advantage over others. So like tribalism is natural. It's that when tribalism is taken to the maximalist position where things become pernicious and bad for people, right? And so I think the Bitcoin community, it's its own way because of that. It's not necessarily negative. I think there's positives to look at that. And the positives trickle down into its economic policy, right? So if you think about, you want something immutable over the long run, you want some kind of store of value currency. Like Ethereum seems like it could be one, but the problem is it's mutable. Like they're changing their business model, they're changing their monetary policy, right? So like those are things that a lot of smart contract platforms can do. But because Bitcoin people are so committed to the way it is, that makes monetary policy predictable. That's powerful. That's like more of a true store of value type thing. And if we were going to go back to like, crypto 2018, it's Ethereum's oil and Bitcoin's gold type stuff. But I think that's very true to an extent. Like Bitcoin has this policy that cannot be changed. So I think that's strong. The firm view is that it could be a potential serious competitor to gold. And that's kind of how we see it.
All right, interesting. And yeah, we got almost 120 people watching live right now. Make sure you share the link to this video on Twitter, on social media, on Telegram, fellow cosmonauts, because now we get down to the good stuff. We're gonna get into Cosmos, Atom, the ecosystem, a little bit of IBC. Also, maybe towards the end, we could talk a little bit about Cosmoverse. But yeah, first off, I'm interested to hear how you heard about Cosmos in the first place.
Wait, hold on. I heard if we get to 10,000 viewers, that fire alarm will go off. It'll be the 10,000 viewers.
10,000. So we only have to 100x the viewership right now. So guys, share this thing. We gotta get to 10,000 live viewers here. Honestly, we should, because this is good stuff. This is good content, So yeah, share the link. But yeah, tell us about your Cosmos journey. How you heard about it first and what got you hooked that you said, man, I gotta research this thing because this sounds interesting.
Yeah, it was like 2020 during the summer, and so I had I don't, if I say first principles, or if I say I caught the crypto bug, or if I say I fell in the rabbit hole, I'm going to pinch myself because I can't stand when people say those same cliches. I know it's like language, whatever. Just anyway, so I caught the. No, I was kidding. So I started in crypto because my company got taken over by another company. I was in this field called proprietary trading, where essentially you're figuring out how to trade things, right? Using math. You're a gambler who uses math and statistics. And I was doing treasury bonds versus treasury futures. And one of the firms I was working for got taken over by another firm. So this firm called DRW bought us out. And the person that was in charge of our group was this guy. I won't say his name. He's been very low key, but he was the first person to do a transaction in Bitcoin. And no, he wasn't the guy who lost money. He was the guy that got the 20,000 Bitcoins. So because of this guy and his prophesizing of Bitcoin, he got me very excited, interested in this space. Like I had a natural inclination towards the subject matter. It's like economic system is fascinating. So I got into that. And then I just saw it as kind of a thing to trade for a while. Like I bought Bitcoins in like $200 and $400. And, I sold them for, a 3x flip, real cool, right? But you don't realize the potential. But anyway, so I kind of just traded all the way through until 2020 when it was like Ethereum use case taken off. And one of my good friends had talked about Chainlink. And I started really looking into the use case and like how it was actually working, these really interesting crypto-economic models. I started reading about that, reading about DeFi. And I was like, well, like I take my dog for a walk every morning. Like, how do I learn about this? Like through podcasts. These podcasts are great. I've listened to History of Rome or History of Byzantine Empire. So I'm like, oh, but why not crypto? So I found all these random podcasts, and one was called the DeFi Times, because it's like, I don't know DeFi. Let's figure out DeFi. And so that was kind of one of the journey endpoints into crypto, was just listening to podcasts, reading white papers, trying to understand like what people were talking about on crypto Twitter, because it's like such a massive space, such a wealth of information. It's like you're at the cutting edge of cryptography and distributed systems, and computer science and statistics and mathematics and high frequency trading. So it's like, it's a really fascinating field. And I was already interested in all those things. So that's kind of how I got into Cosmos. Was they would mention this on the podcast, and I started learning more about it, put it off to the side. I became more of a polka dot person. Because I thought that was a really interesting approach. I thought Gavin was fascinating. I thought it was good architecture for scaling. And then I'm not sure what brought me back to the Cosmos. I think it was, you know what it was? It was I had this coin and I'm like, I don't know what to do with it. And then osmosis started. And I'm like, what is this blonde scientist scam thing? Like, I don't know what it was. Like, that's what it looked like because I couldn't find the founder. So when osmosis started last summer, like that's when I kind of got into the system and started learning about it more. And I was like, this is really fascinating. This is very interesting. This is like Tendermint was at like the apex of all these interesting technologies, like proof of stake, like the Tendermint consensus engine, the Cosmos SDK. Like this is top level stuff. This is an interesting user system that's way understood and potentially had a lot of value. And so I started reading about that, listening to podcasts like Cryptocito and just following guys like Zucky Mannion and Sonny, and just trying to understand like all the things. But I had a full-time job at the point in time, and I was also trading at night, so it's kind of tough to keep up with stuff. But yeah, I found it to be like very cutting edge, fascinating. What I want to say, one more thing. Well, I'll come to
but that's amazing. And like just for context, the DeFi Times podcast is what now evolved into Friends Validator, and together with me and Basil, this evolved into Cosmoverse. Right? It's just amazing to see like how 2 years ago we just started. I remember like when COVID started, I was just like, man, I'm in crypto for a couple of years. I've done pretty much everything wrong for a long time until I like slowly started to have a better strategy, also to invest in cryptos. And I just ordered a camera and started recording. And Fabi and Yuri, who were running the DeFi Times podcast, they did the same thing basically. And we just started in summer of 2020. And in the beginning, we were super excited to have 100 views like on the whole episode. Now we have 120 watching live right now. So it's just amazing to see how like the small steps in the beginning have increased, and have reached also people like you in the beginning, and helped also to understand a little bit and get aware on Cosmos. And I was same like you. Like I also only got into Cosmos basically because I had some Atom for years, not much, just a little bit. I'm like, I don't know, should I sell it or should I just start researching? So I chose the latter, and then I made a tweet about it, and then Jack Sempolin, who is one of the core developers, he then went on a call with me immediately. This is pre-IBC, and he's like, man, we're gonna be the internet of blockchains, and we're gonna almost fulfill our white paper with the launch of IBC. And I was like, what do you mean you're gonna ship your white paper? Like no one in crypto has ever shipped a white paper, right? So, but there we go. And fast forward to now, Cosmos is coming up, and we have the white paper 2.0 coming up, which is specifically for the Cosmos Hub. And that envisions the Cosmos Hub to become an interchain service provider for other chains. And that's also very well explained in your document, where you say that Atom and the Cosmos Hub are well positioned to capture a lot of this value that is being generated over the next, over this decade. But yeah, I think we can get into the report, and I want to actually start.
Hold on, before we go, I want to say that it was really cool to see you grow and just get it done. It's like, I want to make this clear to everyone watching that, like, if you want to get into crypto, like, you just need to get it done. Like, Cryptocito, like, went from like a 20-person podcast that like no one cared about to being here. And all he did was like, he had ambition and did it. Like for me, like the way I got this job at VanEck was actually, I was asked to write a paper, and it was on osmosis. So I wrote a paper on osmosis, 50 pages. I sent it to Sonny. I don't think he read it, but yeah, it's just possible to get here, to do this. Like you just have to make it happen. Like Teddy Roosevelt, like, yeah, he was born rich, but he was also like, he was incapable of physical exercise. Like he had terrible asthma, and he willed himself into being like at least a physical specimen of some extent. So anyways, like, I don't know, to anyone out here watching, like, you can do it. Like you are capable, I swear.
I like that motivational input. I love it. Yeah. And it's true. And it's like all about persistence and finding also your niche, what you're good at, right? Like I never thought like, oh, I will be a big YouTuber one day, but I just loved about talking about cryptocurrencies. And here we are. But yeah, let's get into the report. Actually, I'm going to try to share my screen for that. Let's see if that works. Does it work? Can you see it?
Yeah, you're not gonna share the report, right?
That's alpha.
Yeah.
I just wanna read the first sentence here.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, well, disclaimer also in the report. Please note that VanEck has positions in the Atom token, and then it starts off with a big bang. Based on our discounted cash flow analysis of potential Cosmos ecosystem value in 2030. We arrived at a $140 price target for the Atom token with downside to $1. That's very important. With Atom's price at $10 as of, I guess that's August 2nd, 2022, we like the 14-to-1 odds presented and believe this is a buying opportunity for the token. And then in this report, there are a lot of assumptions and a lot of explainers also about what is a layer zero, what is cross-chain bridging, IBC secret sauce, and all these kind of things. So maybe we can start off first. Yeah, I think we're back on the screen. Yeah, we can start off first by where you can share your the analysis that you use, the methodology that is behind all the research on how you arrive to these numbers, and also how you view the whole ecosystem. Like, what are some of the metrics that you looked at?
Yeah, so the first thing was, again, like that broader thesis, like what does it look like in 2030 for crypto use cases? Like why? So first was like, okay, what are those use cases? Like, how do we organize them? And then like, why would crypto be a good use case? So we teased it out through pretty rigorous internal debates. One of the most, I think, interesting parts is maybe the metaverse, right? But anyway, so the idea was like, okay, metaverse, finance, banking, and payments. right? So finance banking payments would be like anything from sending money to like banking services, to trading on stocks, to issuing equities, you name it, right? And then finally, it was like infrastructure. So like compute, storage, decentralized, like internet infrastructure. And so the idea was like, okay, like over the long run, like what makes the most sense for in terms of market share for this, or at least by 2030? And why would that occur? So we talked about that, and then we came up with some figures and said, okay, based upon the total revenues of these end markets, right, what percentage will be on crypto rails or settled to crypto, right? So that would be deploying a series of smart contracts to an L1, or being like an application specific blockchain, or whatever. And so it was like, okay, from there, like what percentage market capture will Cosmos or Ethereum or whoever it be? And so then we ballpark bull cases, bear cases, and everything in between, like understanding inflation, like long-term token economics, and trying to come together with an understanding of like, okay, like how will not only like the number of tokens exist be at 2030, but also like how will it accrue value? So it's like, okay, you think about like transaction costs, like that should be the major driver, right? Well, like over the long run, like transaction costs should go down substantially. And so it's like, how many transactions do you think people are going to be doing a day? Like obviously you're going to segment like the transaction value to different use cases, right? So maybe if you're like tweeting and those are recorded on the blockchain, you're going to pay like 1/1000th of a penny. Maybe the application pays for it because it's so cheap, right? But and then the other ones, like if you're sending like, $10 million, you need to be done like within 10 seconds, you're going to pay a lot more for that. And so it's like, even with all those things put together, it was this transaction value wouldn't be that high over the long run, in our estimation. And so it was like, okay, a significant portion for layer ones for all these applications would probably be MEV. Because unless they like turn on like the transaction valuation, which might decrease like use, like you probably wouldn't accrue enough to pay for security, right? That's one of Bitcoin's long-term problems. It's like, okay, like if no one's transacting the network because it's like this whale network and it's too expensive to use and it's a store of value, so you don't want to sell it anyways, like how is it going to pay for security once inflation's like very low? And so like you apply that idea to like transaction value and like L1s or L0s or whatever. And it's like, well, transaction revenue can be significant, but it might not be. And so like for us, it was like MEV will come into play, different ways of paying for application storage space might come into play. And so that was kind of the next part of it, was like, okay, like how would that revenue precisely accrue? So the transaction revenue from that total market share, MEV would come from like TVL. And then that was the other component, was like, okay, like of TradFi and all the assets on TradFi, like how much would be like on L1s, right? Like a portion of that will be MEV extractable value because you're moving it around, and thinking about it would be like, okay, it's kind of similar to the way in which like an ETF charges fees. So it's like you put your TVL into layer ones, you're not getting charged a fee per se, but by moving it, you're going to be paying something, and part of that will be MEV probably. So that's kind of like how we were thinking about it, was like top down, right? Like how much TAM revenue, what percentage capture, how that capture happens. And then like what it might look like compared to other chains. Like maybe they're capturing it different, or maybe they have a burn mechanism. So that's where the token economics come into play.
Yeah, and I think with interchain security in the pipeline, and also Atom 2.0, a redesign of the tokenomics that might also introduce a fee burn or something like that. That is like all in the context of interchain security and other interchain services. I think there's a lot that's coming. And that's why also Atom has in the last few weeks gained more traction, momentum, ranked back up in the climbed back up in the rankings, because it's been outside of the top 20 for a while, but now it's back in. But just to make clear, so in the report, it starts off with, we arrived at a price target of $140 per Atom. But then further down, it says that you envision by 2030 that the Cosmos hub itself will 160, or has the potential, of course, not, like you said, none of this financial advice, but has potential to grow 160-fold by 2030, which would mean that the price target based on $10 when you wrote the report would be $1,600 per Atom. And then the $140 is would be the price today, or how is these numbers? How do we have to understand this?
Yeah. The way to look at it is let's talk about interchain security first. Like that's obviously a huge revenue item that we have in there, and the idea is that as chains buy security, they're going to pay through it, maybe through inflation, maybe through transaction costs, or whatever else. So that's important to note. But the idea is that, okay, like you have this revenue stream in 2030. What's that going to be? And then so maybe that number, right, which isn't set in stone, it's just like one of the ways that you can look at it. You discount that back to today. So we had to figure out what the discount factor is. So the discount factor we chose was approximated by CAPM. So just saying, hey, like what's the volatility of Atom relative to some other like anchor rate, right? And the risk-free rate. So maybe like the anchor rate might be like the return on equities, or maybe the return on telecoms, right? So then that's kind of how we got this discount factor to bring it back to today. So we're basically saying like under this bull case, which might happen, right? And then discounting that price back today is what you would get at that approximate 140. That actually is the base case, but base, bull case, bear case, it's just kind of like, hey, what percentage of all crypto will Cosmos take? What percentage will the hub actually secure? Like those are all questions that no one knows. And so that's kind of like a really strong outcome. So it's kind of like this model is kind of more of like a heuristic to say, hey, like, you know, if it's going a certain direction, like, and it's over this price, then what does that price imply? Like, okay, well, what does that price imply for the long run? Like if it's like, if AM token's like $250, I don't know if it will be, but then you'll say, oh, well, like maybe it's a little overvalued at this point, or maybe it's undervalued, you know, like, so that's kind of like the way in which the model is kind of created, is just to say, here's what's possible. Here's like, you know, here's what Zaki's building till 3 a.m. every night, waking up at 5, right? Because this potential.
But yeah, that's cool. And for everyone that's like wondering, like these numbers can't be real, right? Like if you're in crypto for a few years, you know that anything can happen in crypto, right? We've seen 100x's within months, left and right. At the same time, we've seen it's going to zero, just like that, right? I mean, crypto, after all, is a wild industry, but I think there's a lot of room to grow for the whole ecosystem. Right now, we're just below $1 trillion industry, right? That's nothing. That's 1/12 of the value of gold, right? So there's so much to grow. And obviously, I also see some people say like, oh my God, if Atom would go up by 100x by 2030, it would be the biggest market cap. Like, of course, Bitcoin will rise, Ethereum will rise, other ecosystems will rise as well. Atom is not going to take the entire market share for itself. But that said, I think there's some things we can maybe go into it. I also pull up some questions as we talk. For example, layer 0, that's being mentioned in the report. Maybe you can share your views, and then I also have some views on that. So yeah, maybe you can explain what a layer 0 is in your opinion.
Layer 0 to me, I haven't done quite a deep dive on it, but it's more like the application of bridging technology to maybe the absolute application level, right? So it's thinking and saying, okay, like we're not just gonna transfer assets to one place or another. We're gonna actually enable arbitrary messaging to enable composability, right? That's kind of like the way it's supposed to look like over the long run. And so like, if you think about what that means, if they can pull this off and make it into a trustless manner, which is, I think, a big question mark, then it becomes like really fascinating because like, oh, okay, like instead of like me, like having to like pull up my MetaMask and like play and put the numbers in and go to like, you know, Kepler and like, you know, move my tens of millions and billions of dollars that I have, obviously, I can now extract away all that. And instead of saying like, hey, like I need to go to like the Cosmos, or I need to go to osmosis and like buy coin XYZ, like suddenly I can just like go to some like broad front end that extracts away all these components of talking different ecosystems, and this you just say buy it, right? It's kind of like when you trade a stock, like you don't know where that pool, where it came from. Like there's like dozens of dark pools and exchanges, and so you don't really care. Like you just say, hey, buy me Microsoft. Like I think Bill Gates is sweet, right? Like let's put some money on this. And so that's going to be the same way eventually in crypto. So like layer zero's vision is just like change don't matter. All that matters is like ecosystem. So like, what does that say though about layer ones? Like, do they have value anymore? Like if they're just like this kind of back end service, like are they going to be worth as much? No one really knows. So it's like, who's going to control the user? Who's going to control the capital? So I think the layer zero approach could be strong. Like we would call that middleware, right? Like layer zero or flash bots or even like oracles. It's kind of like, we call that middleware, the graph, right? That's all middleware stuff. So it's like, if you go back to like 5 years ago, there's like there's like fat applications versus fat protocols. And that thesis has been teased out to be the protocols have gotten value, but that was last cycle. Like no one knows what's going to be this cycle. It might be the application because they can own the user in some way, or maybe something else we haven't thought of, like middleware, like a layer zero. So I think layer zero is an interesting approach. The problem that I've seen so far is that it's trusted, and you've seen the problem with trusted bridges. And so the trust assumption of having like your own, essentially a blockchain that's coordinating these two blockchains, is saying, hey, this is going on this blockchain, this is going on this blockchain. Okay, this is okay to send. We see the state is okay to send. I've sent the transaction, I confirmed it, and both blockchains like know through the smart contract that layer zero is connected to that they have sent it. And that's not a perfect explanation of how it works, but that's the essence. Whereas like IBC doesn't have like the intermediate trust layer. The real layer doesn't have to be trusted. The trust assumption is that both chains are secure, right? Versus layer zero, you have like an internal layer, or sorry, you have its own blockchain network that's doing that. And that's like an issue with like axelar and other things. So like that, what they're trying to do is create a light client that can understand these different blockchains, and that would be able to communicate in a trustless manner. So there's a project called Composable Finance, which is trying to do that. And there's several others trying to do this architecture, like using kind of what IBC has done to make things trustless. And I mean, no one talks about that. Like what they've done, like Composable Finance, by the way, with like connecting IBC to Near, is like top level interesting. Like they made Near make a change to the way that the protocol is designed, right? In order so they can have this connection from Polkadot to Near. And so it's like things like that, like layer zero strong, I think is like, that could be like the next interesting thing that no one's discussing, because it's abstract, it's hard to understand, but then, but it's powerful. Like, I don't want to, you don't want to deal with all this nonsense. You want to just get your coin.
Man,
right?
You are on top of the things, man. You are on top of the game here. And I agree. Like, by the way, Alpha League, I will have a Twitter Spaces with the co-founder of Near and the CEO and founder of Composable on October 5th. So that's a big one. Really excited that Near is also getting IBC compatible. And yeah, like you said, I think the real point about Cosmos is, and this is all being envisioned like 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? Like they just were ahead of the time, is to really build an internet of sovereign blockchains and not have this fat protocol theory, which most other ecosystems have, is where you have one base layer and everything is built on top of it. Everything is capturing or accruing value to the native token of that layer one, which is cool in terms of value, cool fast, but then you also have a lot of potential risks, right? We've seen it with Solana all the time. Whenever Solana is down, everything is down on Solana. And you also explained it in the report with Terra as an example. Terra was by far the largest cryptocurrency or crypto project or Cosmos chain, basically, in the Cosmos ecosystem, with more than $40 billion in market cap, and it just collapsed overnight. It did not affect Atom. It didn't affect Osmosis. Didn't affect any uptime on any other Cosmos chain. And that's really proving that this thesis, the app chain thesis, is working, right? And IBC as this middle layer that connects all these sovereign blockchains is kind of like also a scalability layer, because you can just transfer value back and forth between all these chains. And once you've done it on Osmosis, super smooth, UX is beautiful. Once you've done an IBC transfer, you're like, this is awesome. This just works, and it's very fast. It's not expensive. It's cheap. I can do cool things with it. So yeah, I think that's important to understand, is that the layer zero is basically the middleware technology that connects all these things. Because I see some people there saying like Atom or the Cosmos Hub is the layer zero, but after all, Atom or the Cosmos Hub itself is a sovereign chain in a network of sovereign chains. So in fact, it is a layer 1, but Atom or the Cosmos Hub now are positioned to provide services to other chains, right? Which kind of like makes it a layer 0 in that sense, but it's still a layer 1. Just the killer application is to provide these services for other chains. And I think that's really cool. And yeah, I just wanted to hear your comments. I mean, you already said a little bit about.
Wait, hold on. I want to make sure that I clarify. I was talking about layer 0 of the project, not the concept of layer 0.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, layer 0 of the project. I thought you were discussing that middleware. Yeah, no, but layer 0 of the concept is the same. It's like a similar idea. It's that you're providing security and a secure structure. Like people like to use examples like, oh, it's like NATO, where you're under the aegis of protection of the validator set, and the validator set token stake behind it, right? So it's strong, it's powerful because you can connect chains to it and have that security.
Yeah, but yeah, I wanted to get into the product market fit of the Cosmos Hub and Atom. You already said earlier that interchain security is what you guys see heavy value accrual for the Atom in long term. But yeah, maybe you can clarify also in the broader scheme of the crypto industry, where do you see the Cosmos Hub being positioned, and where do you see its killer application and product market fit in crypto?
Hard questions. Thanks. So let's think about, like, from an application standpoint, you have this really cool idea and you want to deploy to an ecosystem. And so what are your thoughts? You're like, okay, I got like, 4 devs and like maybe a biz guy and someone to run everything, right? Like biz devs or whatever. And then you say, okay, like what's the cheapest place to deploy? Okay, so you can just write smart contract code, right? You have your devs write smart contract code. You have your marketing guy go on Cryptocito and talk about how great his application is or whatever, right? And then you deploy. So what happens after that? So your application is making money based upon doing whatever it's doing, right? Maybe it's like it's sending really cool JPEGs or whatever. And so then you start saying to yourself, okay, like we're making money, but we can make more money if we had our own blockchain, right? And so that's usually a very difficult endeavor. So if you're making your own blockchain, you're like, okay, I gotta like figure out how to make it. Like how do I get the software written so like it rewards validators, and how do I think about the economics of the token and all this sort of stuff, right? And so at least for the software part, you can come and use like an SDK like Cosmos, or you can use the things that Polkadot's built in Substrate, and that makes that component easier. And so from an application standpoint, it's like, okay, what's some of my baby zone, I'll lose some value leakage to the blockchain. And then from there, like I'll build my own, right? So, okay, you built your own blockchain, cool, but it's not secure. Like how do you get validators? Like you have to bootstrap your own validator set. So it's like you're gonna probably juice your token economics, right? So it's like your inflation's like 400, 500, or 8,000% a year or whatever. You have your Zimbabwe blockchain. Does that provide value? I mean, not really. So that's why something like interchain security or Polkadot share security is powerful, because suddenly it's like, okay, I'm going to pay a set amount that I know for their validator set to make sure that my chain is secure, right? So like the ICS narrative is that, and you think about who's competing. So it's like Polkadot, to an extent, Avalanche, like similar architectural idea. And so like when Cosmos is positioned, it's like, okay, application specific, right? Your application, once it's a daddy application, it goes to the Cosmos, and it has its own chain, and it buys interchain security. And on top of it, like it has a developer framework that's powerful, and it has this connectability. So those two things I think are really important to understand, like the connectivity and the permissionlessness to be able to connect to its chain and buy security that it needs. So like for Polkadot, for example, I'm a big fan of Polkadot, but one of the knocks is that the interchain security that Polkadot provides is that it all costs a lot and the same. So you can't price discriminate based upon your use case. It's just going to cost you a lot, versus like Cosmos, maybe the long term, medium term, you're going to be able to like buy the security you need. Maybe you only need like 10 validators. Maybe you don't need the whole network, but you still have the promise of composability through IBC to an extent, right? Like you quickly swap assets, you can talk to other blockchains. And so you don't really get that at anywhere else except for maybe Polkadot. Like Ethereum, like in a modular architecture, right? Having all these L2s and L3s and L to the power n's, like there's no real way those are gonna be able to connect to each other at this point in time. Like obviously it's on the roadmap, but that's what Cosmos offers. It's like it has this stuff. And so obviously the downsides that if you go to like an Avalanche, they're going to help you build your subnet in ways that you can't on Cosmos, because Cosmos is so immature as an ecosystem in terms of BD and capital, right? There's not a lot of VC money in Cosmos right now, right? To its credit and to its detriment. And so that's what you see for like a Polkadot or an Avalanche, right? Or a Polygon and its supernets. Like Polygon, by the way, has the best business development team in the whole space. Just I'm putting it out there. It's going to be controversial, but it's my opinion, not a Banax. But anyways, so like you have these BD guys who are going to give you money. They're going to give you developer help to build your stuff. And so like Cosmos is positioned where it's got like a really cool framework, interoperability, cool community, best community, smart devs, right? But it doesn't have like this interconnectivity. And then so like we think about this, like, okay, like the way in which I see this progression is like blockchain and the applications, everyone's looking for this killer application, right? So it's like, it's kind of like putting like 100,000 monkeys in a room that are going to like type out like the next great novel, right? And so like the more devs you bring in, the more monkeys. Devs aren't monkeys, obviously, but you know, some of them might be. Who knows? I mean, maybe monkey be a dev. Who knows? But you know, trying to talk about this like killer application, right? And so the idea is like at one point in time, this killer application will come to fruition. And so it's partly a quality of devs, number of devs. And so think about it from the larger standpoint of ecosystems. It's like, can Cosmos attract that critical mass of devs, or have the probability of doing it? So it's kind of how it all is. It's like this space is gonna transform when this killer application comes into play, and everyone's got their idea what that might be. But so anyways, like that is my very long-winded explanation of where Cosmos sits. Was it coherent? Does everyone understand?
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of things, and I think it's clear that Cosmos has a lot of elements that are in production, a lot of things that are used, and this attracts even more developers, right? Like the Cosmos Hub, also, I think that's one of its core value propositions. In the first phase, let's say since it went live in 2019 until half a year ago, I think it was also a launchpad for a Cosmos technology, right? The Cosmos SDK, IBC, it was all first launched on the Cosmos Hub. And now we see massive traction by projects like Osmosis that bring IBC to the masses, that have tens of thousands of daily active users, massive, like billions in volume transferred over IBC. And you explained it also very well in the article that the secret sauce of IBC is that it's a light client bridge, basically, right? Because when we hear bridge, we immediately get scared with all these exploits left and right. And we see that in other ecosystems. IBC is fundamentally architectured in a different way. I had also core engineers of IBC on my channel and talked about this and directly asked them, right after Wormhole got hacked for like 150 million, asked them like, guys, is this something that can happen with IBC? And they said, just based on this light client architecture, it's nearly impossible, basically impossible for something like that to happen, because there is no central point of failure. And I think all these like design intentions that might not have accrued value fast are now coming to light because they are sustainable, right? And you mentioned Polkadot. I personally think Polkadot is pretty cool. There's a lot of respect between the Parity developer community or Parity developers and Cosmos developers since many, many years. I just believe they both started on a different end of the spectrum. Eventually, they want to achieve the same thing. But Polkadot went down to first ship shared security, which you said, has this crazy hype in the beginning. I think the first 5 auctions on Kusama raised $300 million or something like that. So different end of the spectrum, no interoperability standard like Cosmos has, but I think they're also working on it, and I'm excited to see what Polkadot is going to deliver over the next months and years.
Well, in fairness, Polkadot does have a general message passing framework to enable like composability and interoperability. And it's had its hiccups, but it's progressing to the point where there will be some applications that are coming to fruition that will be very interesting. I know this is supposed to be Cosmos only, but you can't count out.
I I had their color founder on my channel. I had people from, was it Moonbeam? Like I'm agnostic. I'm just spending most of my time on Cosmos, but I'm not maxi in that sense. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I was in a Polkadot conference a few weeks ago in Berlin, and it was cool to see that there's respect and conversations between the two, development communities. And there's a lot to learn also, I think, from Cosmos developers, like for Cosmos developers from Polkadot developers. But yeah, anyways, I think that's pretty cool. And like you said, IBC is in production, connecting all these sovereign chains. It's also going outside of the Cosmos ecosystem. You dropped Composable earlier. They're integrating IBC to the .sama world. Near is in the works. Couple of others. But I wanted to ask you, because we talked about the Cosmos Hub and Atom extensively, but you also said that you were early osmosis. So what are your thoughts on like the rest of the ecosystem? What are some projects that you find interesting? And yeah, what is your sense on that?
Yeah, I think it's just like from a user standpoint, like user experience, like using osmosis or something even like the SIF chain, going back and forth, like using IBC is so simple. It's so easy. It's not like I remember when I first chose Avalanche, it was pretty cool. I got like that good bridging token that I was able to sell and make some money. But, I was like, what's going on here? Like, I don't know, like my tokens are like going to be vanishing in thin air. I'm doing push-ups. I'm like running outside. I'm like, is the money there yet? Is the money here yet? Like, it's a terrible user experience, right? They had like that chat. I don't know if you guys remember this. They had a chat where they had like people are like, don't worry, your money's coming through. We'll see. And that was really smart there. And I really like that. But, just in general, like the cross-chain user experience is hinky. It's like, it makes your toes curl up when you send money across like the interweb chain, internet computer thingies, right? Like that's why I like it from a user standpoint is it works. The value is there, it's transferred quickly and you can trust it. And then so projects I really like I'm a huge fan of osmosis. I think what Kujira is doing is quite fascinating. I'm interested to see DYDX and how it integrates with the rest of the ecosystem. Secret Network's obviously awesome. What else? I actually talked to a project. I was looking at the map of zones and I saw this thing called MetaBlock. And I was curious, like, what the hell is that? Like, and so what they're doing long term is they're trying to bring medical records, medical data to the blockchain. And so that kind of like runs into this overarching composability understanding where you use like secret network or some version of zero knowledge proofing to protect your data. Like, think about how much easier it would be to go from doctor to doctor, like with your medical records, rather than having them send it and then have them owning it. And then maybe like losing it to a hack, you keep it yourself and you reveal the data that you want to reveal. Or maybe like eventually you upload your genome to it, right? And you keep your own genome. Maybe it's worth it for you to sell. Maybe it's not. Or maybe like you contribute your genome to a larger project. Like you just have this like really awesome tech and the ability to have something somewhere that you can use to bring somewhere else that's provable. The last part is provable and immutable. And so it's like the things that develop that over the long term will be interesting. And yeah, what other Cosmos projects are cool? I'm trying to think.
What are your thoughts on JUNO Network, Evmos, and Stargate? What are your thoughts on those three?
Yeah, thanks for bringing those up. Yeah, I mean, Evmos seems really cool. It seems like it's a good way to bring in developers. Any like you have the ability to use the EVM. You deploy like your smart contract code. It's kind of like the nursery for you to become your own app chain, right? You deploy to Evmos or even JUNO, right? JUNO with Wasm, and you say, okay, like I can deploy my contracts here. I develop my use case. I get community, right? And then from there, I can build my own application. So it's like, this is kind of like the minor leagues development place for you to be an application chain, right? For Evmos and the Wasm, also fascinating as well. Same idea, right? You're deploying something, maybe eventually you become too big for your britches, and then you go and you be your own zone because you're leaking too much value. But that's, again, like when you think about like, what does that mean? Like Uniswap, like when you leak value, Uniswap's like, okay, Uniswap, if it was its own chain, they could monetize MEV. They can monetize the transaction costs. Right now, they're taking 5 basis points per trade, and that's it. So it's like the potential for them to earn like so much more money when like Ethereum's earning a lion's share in that equation, like 5 basis points on a trade versus like how much they're outpaying for MEV and how much they're outpaying in terms of transaction costs, especially when there's like high contention, meaning like it's volatile and everyone's trying to use the blockchain. And so that's kind of how I see like Evmos and JUNO is just like kind of the place where they'll develop. And I might be wrong, and I'm sure some Evmos or JUNO guys gonna yell at me for this, but the other potential is that those become cool ecosystems themselves. Maybe they become hubs. Maybe Evmos is like, hey, all the cool, like, you know, maybe we'll secure all the EVM type chains. Like maybe the Uniswap of Cosmos comes there. You know, I think that's fascinating. I like so what was the other one you mentioned? You mentioned JUNO. Stargate.
Stargaze. Yeah,
Stargaze. Yeah, I don't know too much about Stargaze. There's just not enough time for these things.
You can bring them into your report next time. They're pretty cool. They're also building like an NFT marketplace. Because you also said earlier stuff about metaverse. There's also stuff going on in Cosmos with Stargaze. OmniFlix is coming up. They have one of the most committed, smartest, and most amazing teams. They're also coming to Cosmoverse. I've been like working with them. They also heavily support us with building infrastructure for Cosmoverse, you know, all the Livestream backend, all these kind of like media things. Metaverse also. We'll, by the way, have a live broadcast in the Metaverse also for Cosmoverse. But yeah, and then we have Passage. I don't know if you looked at Strange Clan, like it's a game in Cosmos. But yeah, there's also a couple of things coming there. And yeah, I mean, I know even I lose oversight at this point. There's just so much going on. And a lot of new projects. Maybe this is something we can wrap up and then try to get some questions on as well. What are some of the things that you guys are doing right now? I guess you have a team that is looking into Cosmos, that is observing all the data points, metrics. But then I guess you're also talking to some teams or trying to find new projects that are building in Cosmos. Like what are some of the actions that you guys are taking, and how do you go about building up more traction in Cosmos?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is just talking to people and understanding and trying to read as much project material as you can. It's just difficult. Obviously, the best focal point for that's like map of zones. Like you see something like that came from Terra, where it'd still be a lot more in the future Terra, like Kujira, and you're like, oh, this is like a really cool application. So it's just kind of like doing like the basic blocking and tackling of like research is like understanding what it needs, the ecosystem, where it's going to come from, and then who's kind of doing that. Like potentially like USDC comes and deploys as a zone or whatever else. Like that's very cool. So yeah, it's like looking at on-chain data, reading Cosmos papers. We're potentially looking at like running like a validator setup, just to like understand a bit more. Yeah, like it's you know, it's tough because, you know, we're agnostic, we're investors, so we're looking all over the place at different things, and Cosmos is like one thing that all the cool kids like for right now. So we're just checking it out and poking around.
Would you say that Cosmos for Fnac is currently the ecosystem that's like that you guys are mostly interested in, or are there other ecosystems that you are like more interested in than Cosmos?
I want to say so many things, but I can't. No, unfortunately, we're a little we're a little more polyamorous at Fnac. We love all ecosystems. No, it's fascinating because you draw back to like what is our thesis. Like you talk to like these VCs, like a lot of these VCs, they don't have time to constantly look at projects. What they do is they have this overarching thesis, right? And then they go, does this fit in the bucket? Is it good for the bucket? Is it good value? And that's what they do, right? And so for us, it's kind of like we're just open to trying to figure out like all the different things, and we don't necessarily need to be wedded to an idea, ecosystem, or thesis, but we really like it. It's really cool. The community is outstanding. We've had a lot of great talks with some of the famous people, you know, and like for me, it's been an absolute dream because this has like always been my dream job, and being able to talk to like Zucky and ask some questions, or, you know, high five Sonny has been really cool. And so that's just like all it is, man. Like basic research, understanding. And yes, I'm sorry I can't say like that this is the dopest, best ecosystem by far. But
all right,
I like it a lot. I like it a lot. But yeah, we got to hedge your bets here, right?
Frankie's saying, just say yes, Patrick. But yeah, I think that's enough to read between the lines. But yeah, it's cool to hear that you guys are very active and also trying to, have more than just a position. Do your research, keep doing your research. I think it's super important because this space evolves so fast, and there's so many things that are constantly improving, changing, and evolving. Yeah, so that's really cool to hear. Let me think. Yeah, maybe we can do some more questions to wrap it up. Everybody in the chat, we have around 150 people now. I saw someone earlier saying that he's only here because of the fire alarm. We didn't get to 10,000. Maybe we do this in 6 months' time. Atom is a top 3 coin. And
Hold on, we got 5 minutes, dude. Like, let's get this going. Like, what do we need to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Atom was actually pumping during the stream. But if it would do a crazy big green candle, I think everybody would just go on YouTube and find the latest Cosmos live stream. But yeah, let's see, 5 minutes time. Maybe Fanex should just right now market buy on osmosis and pump up the price. That would probably help. But anyways, liquid staking. I don't know if you followed the whole trend in the recent weeks. Stride, Quicksilver, Stuffy Hub, P-Stake. What are your thoughts on liquid staking? We just got a new pool on osmosis. What do you think? Is this good for Cosmos, and what is your general take on that?
I don't know. Like, so if you think about like some of the really like bullish estimations I make in terms of ecosystem value, like, so let's say the space is like 5 trillion, right? So it's 5 trillion smart contracts in 2030, whatever the number is, say it's 5 trillion. And then you have like 30 trillion of TVL on there. Well, that can't possibly be from a security standpoint, because you can 51% attack the network and take that 30 trillion. And so if we're looking at something like liquid staking, that presents perhaps potentially an attack vector, right? If you have this easy derivative you can buy rather than just buying a token, it might make it simpler to do a 51% attack and take all network value. That's a security standpoint. From a capital efficiency standpoint, it seems to be better. It seems to be a smarter use of your money rather than just staking, right? But again, like I just worry about the long-term trade-offs on security versus capital efficiency. And so like you see something like on Ethereum where Lido has a massive market share, where it's like, it's 30% of all staked value, and then it's like 90% of all liquid staking derivatives. So it's cool, but I think also in that kind of marketplace, like it's hard not to see it to be a winner take all, right? It's kind of like, when you think about liquidity of the liquid staking derivative itself, like where it goes in DeFi, like it's going to be some argument in terms of capital efficiency being maximized. Then it's going to be like, wherever's the highest yields, maybe like some enterprising team pulls a Rockefeller, right, and gives you like some insane amount of money, and then all of a sudden they dominate the market and they have all liquid staking market share. So that means, and then suddenly they're integrated in all the applications. So it's like, it's hard not to see that materializing, given like the adversarial nature of like crypto stuff and then the security concerns. But I think it's awesome. It's outstanding from a user standpoint. Like it's great. You can get tons more money. Like what else do you want?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it, and we see a lot of projects coming now to life. Also, Lido, you mentioned, they're also deploying, I guess, on top of Neutron, which is a consumer chain, to the Cosmos Hub. But yeah, I think in Ethereum, they pretty much dominate the whole liquid staking derivative market there. But yeah, there's another question that came in very early in the stream. I know you can't disclose anything here, but how much skin in the game, dear Vanek? Maybe you can share like how big you're betting on Cosmos.
Unfortunately, as much as I'd like to say something that makes everyone happy, I like making people happy. I cannot disclose that, but thanks for asking, brand account.
All right, there we go. Yeah, I just see a lot of comments and conversations in the chat. I don't see any more questions. I want to wrap it up from my side, talking a little bit about customers. I know you tried your best to come, but it's looks like it's not working out, or did the last hour FOMO you more in so that you find a way to come? What's up?
I would love to come, but we have a lot to focus on here, and it's business first. Not that Cosmos isn't going to be our business in some respect, but yeah, we have a lot more things we have to do before we get to that kind of stuff. It's unfortunate. I would love to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun, interesting, great projects, awesome hosts, maybe the most handsome eyes in crypto. Who knows?
There we go. I appreciate it. And yeah, you said earlier, like onboarding developers is a big thing, and at Cosmos, that's also one of the big focuses that we have. We have 12 workshops throughout the 3 days. We have a big hackers lounge with mentors, like you said, Sunny, Saki, they will all be there. And yeah, I think as of now, we probably have 300, 400 developers, many of which are not in Cosmos. So for them, it will be interesting to learn about what is Cosmos, how can I build how can I build my app chain in Cosmos? Yeah, it's really, really exciting stuff. I'm pumped. I hope we can have a big impact here also in Latin America, which is a big emerging market in crypto as well. But yeah, let me see, 2 more questions, quick ones, and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah, let's do it.
Murray is asking whether there's a crypto Fennec ETF.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to pitch projects. I'm not licensed, but you can look up, there are products that VanEck offers that may or may not be in crypto. I apologize, I have to be cryptic. It's just the rules. Like I can't pitch anything, say do anything. So you got to find out for yourself. Sorry, Mary, but
what is up with the Bitcoin ETF? Because that was rejected a couple of times, right? Like I don't know what's the latest on that.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate like political maneuvering situation. This is my view, not VanEck, where the essence is that Gary Gensler, he has very high ambitions. He wants to be Treasury Secretary, and he wants control over this. So for him, like this is basically something that he can show to people. So he got crypto under the SEC, and so he's waiting for some sort of congressional authorization to start looking over of all digital assets. Like it's a new asset class. Like who's in control? It's the CFTC. It's the SEC. Is the office of the comptroller or whatever. There's like, it's Washington. There's like 40 different entities that could possibly have jurisdiction. Everyone wants this because that means more budgets, more people, more money, more power. And so at the end of the day, like they have to figure that out. And it's probably going to take a congressional action. And there's seemingly no impetus to do this right now, other than do like very odious and arguably illogical things like the stablecoin regulation, which might prove to be just like, overly burdensome. You can understand. But yeah, so yeah, that's kind of the status, unfortunately. But oh man, what crypto regulations are coming?
Yeah, that's a follow-up.
Yeah, you saw the stablecoin thing. We've had Senator Alumnus a couple of times at some of our events. We talked to them, to some other people in positions of authority. And I mean, the White House working paper that they released, I believe was it earlier this week or last week? I know things go so fast, but yeah, they gave a really negative vibe. And what happened with Terra, like really screwed things up. Like people were a little bit not into it before or agnostic, and the Terra collapse, like, a lot of good people, a lot of retail investors lost money. That's a concern. Like that's bad. That shouldn't happen. Like as much as you love the space and I love libertarian economics, like you shouldn't tell someone something's gonna be stable and then it blows up in your face. Like that's like I've met tons of projects at Consensus in Austin that were like, yeah, that was our treasury. So you're talking about smart, sophisticated people that got destroyed in that. But yeah, hopefully they don't do anything that's silly, but there could be there could be some things coming through, but nothing that we know exactly on our end that's like definitive or exciting. It's not like they're gonna, allow tokenized money market funds tomorrow.
Cool, man. Really appreciate it. I think we can wrap it up here. We learned a lot. We also learned that Patrick is a fellow cosmonaut that is on top of the game in Cosmos. Very excited and bullish. Actually, I'm going to drop a link to the report here for people that haven't read it yet. And yeah, I mean, sad that you can't make it to Cosmoverse, but hopefully for the next one. And yeah, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insights. And hopefully next time we talk, we can do this in half a year or something. Atom will be a top 5 cryptocurrency. So
yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Again, it's like really cool to be on this. And yeah, I appreciate everyone in the audience. It's good to see you. Maybe I'll be back one day.
Yeah. Is there any way people could connect with you or read more of your stuff or track of what you guys are doing, or anybody from FANAC?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Obviously, FANAC has a website. If you don't know how to use a computer and find the website, I just can't help you. You probably shouldn't buy crypto. Sorry. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I have a non-Twitter account. I troll people, so I don't think it's appropriate to release. But yeah, always through LinkedIn. That's probably the best. LinkedIn.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Always free chat.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys. Take care. See you everybody at Cosmoverse in 4 days. It's crazy, but yeah, we'll see you guys. Take care.